Hello and welcome to COS Indiana Live as we bring you Roundtable. The Roundtable segment is presented here every fourth Monday of the month at 7 p.m. We'll be focusing on education and discussion of the topics and challenges we all face as we use the Constitution to save the Constitution. Join us now as we bring you COS Indiana Roundtable with our MC, John Ackerman.
Welcome back to COS Indiana Roundtable. I'm your host, John Ackerman. This is broadcast number 187 of COS Indiana Live, and we're glad you're here. Joining me in a few moments will be our state leadership team, plus a special guest. Our topic will be national debt or national disaster. Now, if you have a question or comment about this, you can post it beginning right now. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, just click the comment button and enter your comment or question. You can also send us email at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. After the roundtable conversation, we'll tell you how you can get personally involved in Convention of States. Before bringing the panel on, let me ask you to help us grow our audience by clicking the like and share buttons and by making a comment or asking a question. You see, the YouTube and Facebook algorithms notice viewer responses. They know that something's going on, and then they show it to more of their users. So help us grow our audience by making a comment and by clicking those like and share buttons. And now we welcome our roundtable participants. First one up is our State Director, Dale Parrish. Welcome back, Dale.
Hello, John. Nice to be with you tonight.
Good to see you. And Dale Tipton, our State Grassroots Coordinator. Hi, Dale.
Hello, John. Glad to see you.
Glad you made it. Gary Harbaugh, our Indiana State Media Coordinator. Hi, Gary.
Hello.
And Ken Kashuba, our State Communications Coordinator. Now, he's the guy, if you make a comment or ask a question, he's the guy who's monitoring those, and he gets as many of them as time will allow up onto the screen for the panel to deal with. And our guest panelist this month is Brandon Garrett. Brandon, welcome.
Hey, John, look at this room full of distinguished gentlemen.
Look at that.
Company this week.
Yes.
Oh,
and
boy, he is good. He is good, isn't he, John?
Put
And
the
you
bonus
bring the
points up
level
now.
up.
Put the bonus
That's
points
right.
up now.
Okay, Brandon, tell us where in the state you are.
So I'm on the far east side of Indianapolis, kind of in the Cumberland area.
Okay, I've heard of Indianapolis. Is that in the middle of the state somewhere?
Yeah, somewhere around in there. They got some big racetrack over on the west side, something about the greatest spectacle in racing. We might have heard of that. I'm not sure.
I think I heard of that once.
Yeah.
Okay, and Brandon, what's your relationship with Convention of States?
So right now I'm district co-captain of District 89 with my my lovely wife, and I'm interim region captain for regions 13 and 14. So I've kind of got the lower right-hand quadrant, basically, of Indianapolis.
Okay, well, we're glad to have you participating tonight. As I said a moment ago, our topic this month is national debt or national disaster. One of the three types of constitutional amendments that we are working toward is fiscal responsibility, fiscal restraint, because we believe that the federal government, just like our families and just like our state, must learn to live within its means. And so we're going to be talking about that as we address the national debt. So my first question tonight, and I'm going to throw it to Brandon first, and the other men can chime in if they have things to add, is Brandon, what's the difference between the debt and the deficit? We hear those terms thrown around a lot, but what's the difference between the two?
Yeah, they are thrown around a lot, John. You're right, and you kind of alluded to the definition of deficit, right? Like we all as household, responsible household members, like we have to live within our means, live within our budget. And at federal sense, the deficit is when there's a shortfall between basically the amount of revenue that's coming in. That could be in a business, or in this case, the government, and the actual expenditures out. The government is very well known for being hog wild with deficit spending. And you contrast that with debt, which is basically money that we've borrowed as a country. It could be to other countries, it could be to the Federal Reserve, any number of places. But on the personal side, that could be like for us, that's credit card debt, your house, your car, anything like that.
So the deficit is in this fiscal year, it's the excess of spending over revenues, and the debt is the accumulation of all those deficits over. How old is the Republic now? 250? I can't do math very quickly in my head. But Brandon gave us a good start. Either Dale or Ken or Gary have anything to add to what he said about the difference between debt and deficit? Dale Tipton.
Well, it sounds like from what I've read historically, if you spend more than you take in, that has been financed with a couple of different things, either treasury bills that are sold to the American public so that they can recoup some of that money, or they also had the option to borrow money from themselves, and that generally came from the Social Security Trust Fund. And so years ago, there was a lot more money going into Social Security than was being paid out, and now that whole thing has kind of started to turn around. Now we're paying out more than is coming in. And so that method of financing has become a little bit more problematic, which I think creates some problems for us.
Yeah, Congress borrowed from that trust fund, and they've never paid it back, have they? Dale Parrish.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, John, what you said, that you hear this frequently, and I'm always amazed to hear it. And you hear it from people that ought to know the difference, you think. They confuse the term deficit with the term debt, and they refer to each in the wrong way, and you explained it very well, where the deficit is for a given period of time, revenue versus expenses, whereas the debt is the accumulation of these deficits. So
yeah.
It's just amazing to me. I just wanted to point again how you got to listen. You got to listen to people that are supposed to know what they're talking about, but you got to listen to what they're saying.
A lot of times they're just filling the air with the sound of their voice.
Yes.
And they don't know what they're talking about. Ken Kashuba, what do you have for us, Ken?
Yeah, I think the simplest way I can see it and put it in layman's terms is basically, if you got a credit card in your wallet and you go out and you spend $1,000 on a smart TV, and at the end of the month you only pay off $500 of it, well, the deficit is $500. So the simplest term is basically what's not, the deficit is a result of that. So that was the simplest way it was described to me, and that's the way I kind of can put it together. So
two related terms here, but the thing we're concerned about tonight with our topic is the national debt, and we're calling it national debt or national disaster. Why? There's the question we just talked about. Okay, so it's the national debt that we're concerned about. And that debt is created by years and years of deficit spending, because it all adds up, and sooner or later you have to pay the piper, don't you?
Right.
Okay. Now, in the news, we hear talk about a debt ceiling, and supposedly, we reached it within the last several weeks, but the Treasury is using enhanced bookkeeping techniques or something or other. But what is all this talk?
Extraordinary measures.
That's the euphemism. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's all this talk we hear about the debt ceiling? What is it? Brandon, can you help us understand that?
Yeah, I'll kind of jump off of the analogy that Ken was using with the credit card. I mean, basically, the debt ceiling is your credit card limit. That's the amount of money that we're allowed to spend that the Federal Reserve will, kind of back us in terms of what we have in our budget. And like you said, we've been bumping up against that quite a bit.
Yeah, and right now we're coming up against it, and they say that D-Day is coming up sometime in June. Not the military D-Day during World War II, but debt ceiling day coming up sometime in May or June or July. I'm not quite sure when. But anybody else want to make a comment about debt ceiling? Yes, Gary.
So before 1917, there was never a debt ceiling because Congress, each time the government wanted to sell bonds, Congress voted to approve that issue of bonds. During the First World War, they knew they needed to borrow a lot of money. And so Congress basically said to the Treasury, you can borrow anytime you want up to this limit. And since then, the debt ceiling, what it was called, has been raised about 90 times. So it's a ceiling, but is it really a ceiling if you raise it like every time the wind blows? I don't know.
Yeah. And I'm thinking,
a limit.
So it's only been raised 90 times. Huh? That's almost once a year for the last 116 years.
But see, there's promises that go along with that. They'll raise it if they promise to do this or that, and they always come through, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Right.
I'm thinking there's a ceiling above my head right now, and if I try to artificially raise that ceiling, I might get by with it once or twice, but pretty soon the whole structure is going to come tumbling down on me. Yes, Dale Tipton.
And it seems like over time, it's really become just a bargaining chip for whichever political party is in power. And so whenever the debt ceiling comes up and they start debating it, then there's always this give and take. Well, we'll raise it if you agree to do this or if you agree to do that. And it's although the debates get heated at times, it seems like a pretty much a foregone conclusion that it's always going to be raised to meet whatever the demand is.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter which party is in the majority. They're going to raise the debt ceiling, but it becomes a time for the minority party then to bargain. We'll only vote for it if you give us this. And that's where the backroom deals come in. And so I'm pretty sure there's a lot of secret conversations going on in the halls and offices of Congress while they're getting ready to raise this debt ceiling. And it'll be interesting to see what comes about over the next few months. Now, it seems to me that a lot of this problem came because the United States went off the gold standard. And so I want to ask this next question. What's the relationship between the gold standard and the debt ceiling? Okay. What do those two things have to do with each other? Brandon, you want to take first stab at it?
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the gold standard is we haven't been on it for quite some time. So that in and of itself creates a whole host of problems. I mean, there's pros and cons to being on the fiat system, which we are on now, but the gold standard kind of provides an inherent limit to the ceiling, because in order to raise that, you would have to devalue the physical asset, which is what, in the terms of the gold standard, is agreed upon internationally by multiple countries. So by going to basically money that's worthless, fiat, we can just raise the debt ceiling like you said, some odd times in the last 110 years.
And when we do that, we quote borrow money from ourselves or from outside entities, and we print more money to make it happen. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, Dale.
It was kind of interesting to read about whenever we were under the gold standard, as Brandon talked about, whenever they set this limit, you could say that gold was $500 an ounce. And so if gold was $500 an ounce, then a dollar was equal to 1/500th of an ounce of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had something that was concrete that you could really go, oh yeah, this is exactly what this is. Whereas now, we really don't know, because with the fiat system, it's kind of if you think it's worth something and the government says it's worth something, then maybe it is.
Yeah, but it's not worth as much as it was last month or last year or 10 years ago. That dollar is falling in value. Gary, did you want to say something?
Yeah, the gold standard really put a limit on how much money Congress could spend each year because it limited the expansion of the money supply. The reason they can spend untold money is because there is no limit with fiat currency. They can just print as much as they want. It's really created not so much the printing press, but electronic bookkeeping entries. And so there's just no limit to what Congress can spend or will spend when there's no gold standard to put a limit on what they can do.
So if we were still on the gold standard, I take it that the debt ceiling wouldn't be a problem because there's a limit. There's only so much gold, and each ounce of gold is worth so many dollars, and that's it. And you have to live within that. Is that right?
It's essentially what it amounts to.
You hit it on the head, John.
Okay. Okay.
And what's interesting about that too, I'll kind of jump off on where Gary's kind of going with that. Like, there's an inherent limit because we have to back that currency with gold when we're on the gold standard. With fiat, there's no limit. And if you go in and look at the economics of what have happened the last 2 or 3 years, 40% of all US dollars in circulation now have been printed within the last 3 years.
Wow. Where did you find that kind of information?
I don't remember I've seen it in multiple places. I mean, you just Google the, how much money's been printed in the last decade, and Google will spit that out for you.
So again, you said 40% of the money that's in circulation has just been printed or created in the last 3 years.
Since COVID.
Yeah.
There is the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has an extensive website that has all that kind of information, and it's a great resource.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Dale Tipton, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's interesting that apparently we were all set on this track back in 1933, whenever the Emergency Banking Act, I guess they also called it the Glass-Steagall Act, whenever that was all put in place to prop up the banks after going through the Great Depression. That was where all that started, because I guess that act effectively took us off the gold standard, although it was like in 1971 under President Nixon that it was formally recognized. But we'd really been off since 1933.
During the Great Depression. It tells you about decisions that are made in times of crisis. They might not be the best decisions. Rule of thumb that I've tried to live my life by is don't make major decisions during time of crisis. Wait till the crisis is past and then use rational, calm thinking to figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to this debt ceiling thing. What would happen if this summer came and Congress didn't raise the debt ceiling and we reached it? We bumped up against it. What would happen if we reached this debt ceiling, Brandon?
Well, you've kind of alluded to it, John. I mean, that right now we're seeing the Fed use, extraordinary measures as they call it, which is just some fancy moving around of ones and zeros on the digital paperwork. But outside of that, it would kind of get us a little egg on our face in terms of the international stage and in the the faith and full backing of the U.S. dollar. I mean, we are the globally accepted currency, and that could cause a little bit of a shakeup and a lack of faith on the global stage in the effectiveness and the ability of the dollar to be a stable currency for the rest of the world.
Okay, and that would be pretty serious. Dale Parrish.
Haven't I heard somewhere where it's against the law for now I don't know what this means, but that it's supposedly against the law for us to default, or against the law to default on certain expenditures? Is that true or not? Does anyone know?
Gary?
Well, I mean, you could say you're violating a contract if the government borrows money and promises to pay it back and then, misses an interest or a principal payment. They violated their contract. And so that perhaps what you're thinking of, I'm not real sure.
No, I was thinking of, I think it comes up in, when people start talking about, well, what about Social Security payments? Well, what about, Medicare payments? Would those stop? And it seems like I heard somewhere where, by law, those cannot stop. Those cannot be stopped. What that means, I don't know. How they do that, if they hit the debt ceiling, I don't know how that's done. But maybe I misunderstood what was being said.
Well, I think we're all agreed. We hope we never find out.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Hope we never find out, because it could be the shaking of the foundations. Yeah, Dale.
Well, the way we're doing things right now, it would seem that even if we were close to the debt ceiling, that we could just arbitrarily print as much more money as we needed, and that would forego the reason for that ceiling to be lifted.
Well, the Federal Reserve can do all kinds of things that defy the imagination.
I'll throw out one more thing. Today, a lot of the economists are working under what they call the modern monetary theory, and under that theory, you can print money as you need money, and that as the government creates money, that it stimulates the economy with that money being spent, which adds money back. And the claim is under this theory that the debt or deficit does not matter. And they say that the proof of that is that they've been operating this way for some time. The debt and the deficit has continued to increase, and we still have a good functioning economy. And so that's, a lot of people swear by that, and they say there's no reason to fear. It doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind, but I mean, there are academic people and economists that fully buy into that.
Okay. That's
a lot of
interesting.
economics that have never run a business. They try to run a business that way, see how long you keep the doors open.
Good point. Good point. Well, we've been kicking this around for 23 minutes now. And so I want to come right out and ask the big question. How much is the national debt? Brandon, take it away.
Well, before we dive into that number, I want to give some context to this because, I mean, let's be transparent. It is an astronomical number. And many of us can't conceptualize $1 million, let alone $1 billion or even $1 trillion. And we know that the debt is going to be somewhere north of that because the recent omnibus bill that they passed just last year was $1.7 trillion, right? So if we put that in the context of time, okay, 1 million seconds is about 11 and a half days. So that's not too bad. Like, well, a week and a half, that's not too tough to wrap your head around. But when we stretch out to 1 billion seconds, now we're looking at 32 years. We're talking about the third of the average human life is $1 billion, and we're shucking billions of dollars over to Ukraine and all over the place right now. But where things get really hairy is when you look at 1 trillion. 1 trillion seconds is 32,000 years. 32,000 years.
Wow.
So when we look at the national debt, and I'm sure many of you have heard of the resource, the USDebtClock.org. It's a fantastic resource. You can see it in real time, and all of those little bitty squares will tell you, exactly what that square means. But you see the big number there on the top left, $31.5 trillion, and it's just going and going and going like the Energizer Bunny.
It's moving so fast I can't even read those numbers in the
right
in the tens and ones column.
Right.
There are some scary numbers on that.
You need a better look at this and see if that help any.
That brings
Yeah,
it in even closer.
Yeah, that brings it up, and it's made like a quick little dashboard, kind of like you would see on your car. Green is basically a good number. Red's not necessarily something you want to see. You don't want to see that the dreaded check engine light, right? Well, there's a lot of red on that dashboard there.
And this is live right now, Dale. Is that right?
That's right.
We're looking at it live at about 7:25 on Monday night,
Right.
February 27th.
That's right. A lot of information here. A lot of information. We could spend a whole roundtable just analyzing the various information on this. It's amazing, really.
And anybody can see this at that website,
Yes.
usdebtclock.org.
Yeah.
Wonder who sponsors this. So I don't think there's a ready answer to that, but Brendan, you've taken us into this. So the national debt is north of $31.5 trillion. Yeah, Ken, what do you have?
Well, for the longest time, the chat board was extremely quiet, and all of a sudden, it popped in with a bunch of things here. So there's a couple of questions that I'm going to go ahead and throw in here. So we might have to break this up a little bit. I'm not sure totally whether this one has to do with what we're talking about, but we're going to put this up by Melanie No. I think it's Nob or Nob. I'm not sure of the pronunciation of your name, Melanie. I'm sorry if I butchered it, but her question is, as a healthcare worker, what does COVID have to do with this, and what can we do for staff? We are working over 120 hours in 2 weeks. We are tired, and she followed that up with saying that her question about COVID totally has to do with the national debt. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to take a stab at this. I'm not totally following her question, but maybe somebody can help.
Gary, do you have a thought?
I do have a thought on that. There's a gentleman, investment banker named Edward Dowd. There's a website writes about this. He feels like part of the whole basis of COVID was to blow up the system because governments around the world are going to default on their debts, and they needed a crisis to give them an excuse for it. And between COVID and what looks like is shaping up potentially as World War III, would give the governments of the world an excuse to say, we're going to have to do away with all of our debt and reset by converting to a digital currency, something like that. So I don't know if that's what's going to happen or why it's happening, but it's a possibility, and somebody smarter than me proposed that as a reason.
You know, there was a time I would have written that off as a conspiracy theory, but these days it's completely believable.
Yeah, we had one more, and this goes back to the goes back to the gold topic we were talking about, and this is from John Graves. He says, "How do we return to the gold standard? Is it possible?"
Well, I'm not an economist, but I don't think we can. Brendan, did you have a response?
It would be because we're so far gone with the dollar number and fiat. It would be extremely difficult and extremely uncomfortable globally. And by that, I mean, there literally is not enough gold on the face of the earth to support the amount of debt that we have just in the United States, let alone, internationally. So there would be a massive, what's called in economic terms, a deleveraging, which to really break it down in simplest terms, we would have pain and discomfort financially, the likes of which have not been seen since during the Depression, just to go back to the gold standard.
Okay. Gary, did I see your hand come up?
Yeah, I read an extensive paper about this, and the long and the short of it is, to go back to the gold standard, government would have to cut spending. Our government would have to cut our spending to be equal to the revenue that we take in, which means about 60% of the government spending would have to just go away. And Congress doesn't have the courage to even think about that, let alone do it. So I don't think there's much chance we go back on the gold standard anytime in the near term.
Okay. Ken, anything else from the chat box?
Not from the chat box right now. No.
Okay, very good. Well, I think underlying all this stuff is my next question for the panel. And it is, why is the national debt a problem? What are the implications and ramifications of this $31.5 trillion debt? Brandon, you're the guest. You always get to go first.
Well, we're kind of seeing a little bit of what happens now when you have, reckless spending. Like I said before, the 40% of all dollars in circulation have been printed since COVID. And we're seeing, bouncing back and forth between, 9-10% inflation or whatever they really want to claim that it is or it isn't. I think if you really dig into the minds of people like Ray Dalio and some others, I can't remember the gentleman Gary mentioned, but in a practical sense, you're talking 15 or 16%. So to continue to have that debt, to carry the interest on it, I mean, our interest payments alone are $3.5 trillion. It's just an astronomical amount. We just simply cannot, like any business or any household, can't just continue to spend like there's no tomorrow, because eventually the rent's going to come due.
Okay. Ken.
One more question popped in on that one. It makes a little sense on this one. When it comes to worldwide debt, are we the biggest culprit? John wants to know.
Brandon is nodding his head yes. Do you know that?
Yes, we absolutely are. And I think that came from John. John, check out the US debt clock.org. I mean, it will allow you to rewind back decades. It will even show you where the U.S. is at on the global scale. And if I remember correctly, because I don't have it pulled up on my screen now, I think we are well above and beyond the next 3 or 4 countries combined.
Wow. So we are the biggest culprit. Okay, someone else want to add an answer to this question. Why is this thing a problem? Dale Tipton first.
One thing that comes to mind, due to the way we spend, a lot of the money that we spend, we have to borrow. And so if you think about it in a family setting, if you've got a number of children and one of your kids comes to you and they want to borrow some money, and if you have a nice surplus of money, then it's great to be able to give them the money and, help them out. But if you have to go and try to find a bank to loan you some money so that you can turn around and give it to one of your children, you may want to think twice about that. And so, if you look at what we're doing with Ukraine, I think that amounts north of 200 billion or something now that we've sent over there. And most of that money is borrowed. And so that just makes all the numbers go up. And what's the chance of that being repaid? Doesn't look real good right now.
Mm-hmm. And Dale Parrish, you had a comment.
Well, I think I look at the problem as the problem that we're leaving our grandchildren and great grandchildren. They're the ones that are going to have to deal with this most likely, or certainly feel the impact of this as it goes on and on. So it's what we're leaving for future generations to have to deal with. That's, I think, a big part of the problem.
Big issues there. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've spent about half an hour laying out the problems and some of the issues that are related to the problem. We're going to take a short break from this because we want to tell our viewers about our COS Indiana Surge Day on March the 8th at the state capitol. Now, the purpose of Surge Day is to promote Convention of States, to have a presence at the State House, and to meet with legislators. We had one last year, and Ken made a video of that, and we want to show that to you right now.
Okay, this is a new video that Ken made, and it's very short, but we'll be playing it. We'll play it here.
Pretty good, Ken. I didn't know you had a new one. I thought we were
Yeah,
going
had to keep it short and sweet to try and promote that coming up March 8th. But just
Okay.
got to
What
get
time do
somebody's
you,
attention.
what
Yeah.
time do we want people to show up at the State House on that March the 8th?
Well,
9
we're
o'clock
gonna-
is the kickoff time, but
Okay.
go ahead,
Yeah.
Dale.
we're going to have our presence there from about 9 to 3 that day.
Mhm.
And folks, we want to get 100 people there that day, representing Convention of State, and we'll have an information table set up. We've got appointments lined up with legislators, state reps, state senators. So even if people can come for 1 hour or 2 hours, whatever they can spare, please come down and meet each other, talk to each other, and represent Convention of States and have a good day. So that's next Wednesday. That's coming up very soon here.
That's next week.
March 8th. That's
Next week, Wednesday.
That's
Now,
right.
I've been to the State House. It's a big building. So if I were to show up on Surge Day at 9 o'clock, where would I find you?
I think we're going to be up on the second floor, I believe. Am I right, Gary? The second floor? Up in the
Second or
foyer.
third, whichever floor. I think it's the second floor where the entrance is to the House chamber and Senate chamber.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. Second floor. Mm-hmm.
That won't be hard to find. I know the spot. I've been there.
We'll have big signs up. You won't be able to miss us. So
Okay, very good. So we hope to see up to 100 or more people at
that's
the
what we're
state
shooting.
capitol on March the 8th.
That's right. That's right.
COS Surge Day 23. All right. Now let's get back to our topic of the night, national debt or national disaster. We've laid out the problem, but what are some possible solutions? Okay. Brandon, first up to bat.
Well, the biggest one is leveraging, why we're all here at Convention of States. I mean, not to throw the big bower for those of us in Indiana that understand some euchre analogies, right? Like that's what we got to do. We got to utilize Article 5 and impose fiscal restraint on the federal government. The vast majority of states have a balanced budget amendment or law of some fashion on the books. We have to start there, but we have to start there.
Yeah, I understand that 49 of the 50 states are required by their own law or constitution to balance their budget. Vermont is the only one that doesn't have to do that. So why shouldn't the federal government? So that's one solution. Leverage, use Article 5, make it happen. Other thoughts, other ideas, possible solutions. Gary?
One of the items discussed as a possible amendment to the Constitution, the actual amendments will have to come out of the convention itself, but a lot of people within Convention of States movement have talked about an amendment that would say that no bill in Congress can deal with more than one subject or appropriate money for more than one department of government. If that were enacted, it would eliminate this omnibus spending bills that they just throw in everything in the kitchen sink, and you either vote for it or you shut down the government. We'd stop playing that game, which would go a long way toward giving accountability, because instead of saying, you have to vote for everything, you could pick out the items that you wanted to vote against if you were a member of Congress.
Okay. So a balanced budget amendment, an amendment to limit a bill to one subject or money to one department of government. Ken, what do you have there?
Outside of the amendments, there's also been talk. I mean, this has been talked about for a while, but I don't know if anybody else has heard of the penny plan, but that has been introduced as reducing the government spending by 1% every year. A penny on the dollar, just reducing their spending amount by that amount. 1% appears to be one way that we could at least start to reduce the debt. We're not making any attempt to reduce the debt at all.
That would be way short of a constitutional amendment, but if Congress had the political courage to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Dale Tipton, you had a hand up.
Well, another thing that I've thought about is we need to change the way government speaks to the American people. Just as an example, whenever they're talking about all this monetary budgeting and everything, they expect an increase every single year. And so if you have a department where there's not an increase, they say that they've cut spending. And that doesn't make any sense at all to the average person. But the people in government, they speak in ways like that to cloud the issue, and it's really unfortunate. And I think if they talk truthfully about what the facts are to the American people, they wouldn't have near the support for some of these things that they've done in the past.
Good point. Yeah, Dale Parrish.
Quite honestly, this could be a not so painful process if they just did a little bit every year. If they did just a little bit, just a small reduction every year, and that requires cutting spending, truly cutting spending, but it doesn't have to be tremendous amounts. It can be a small amount every year, because I think balancing the budget, or I should say eliminating the debt, you're talking about many years here to get that done. So if they would just do a small amount every year, we could have it done in 5 to 10 years, it seems to me.
Okay. A lot of good answers to this. Before I move on, anything else? Some other possible solutions? Brainstorming time. Gary?
I think the most important point is the thing that this is something that can only happen from a convention of states by we the people forcing the government to start cutting spending. Congress itself will never do that because they just won't. We've seen for 100 years they've done nothing but blow up the spending. There's no fiscal limit without a gold standard. So it's got to come from we the people, and it's got to come through an Article 5 convention, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you there. Yep.
I believe in what Gary just said.
You second the motion, huh?
I second that motion. Yeah.
All in favor?
Yeah.
We know we're all in favor.
It is true. It is true. We the people are going to have to do this. That's absolutely true.
There's too much political pressure on the Congress, and
right.
Too much lobbying.
Right.
Too much lobbying. Yeah.
Right.
And too much money in politics. So it's going to have to be forced by a constitutional amendment. Yep. Well, when we talk about one of the amendments we want an amendment to require some kind of fiscal responsibility or fiscal restraint. And this is really my last question on this topic. What do we mean by fiscal responsibility? What do we mean by that, Brandon?
Well, in simplest terms, don't spend more than we're taking in. I mean, that's the most basic thing to start. Now we can, certainly we could probably do a whole, whole roundtable just on this particular topic alone. But I mean, when you look at like the debt ratio to GDP, which is gross domestic product, meaning basically if the U.S. government was a business, what are they producing and selling? Like we're at over 120% of debt to GDP. Even just a simple saying, hey, no, you can't be that highly leveraged. I mean, a bank is typically not going to loan you more than 80 or 90% of the value of your home. Like something like that would create an inherent limit would be good, because that's not going to limit the economic growth. Because as GDP grows, you'd be allowed to spend more money. So that you would be kind of incentivized internally to do good things, be a good steward with the money that you've got to stimulate the economy in ways that are actually beneficial and not artificially stimulated by just, printing $1.7 trillion and 40% of all money in circulation right now.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good answer. Anyone else have an answer to that? What do we mean by fiscal responsibility or fiscal restraint? I've seen both of those terms. Yes, Gary.
Sometimes people worry that a balanced budget amendment would simply mean they have to raise taxes. but one of the things that's been discussed is limiting annual spending to some percentage of our gross domestic product. So a balanced budget does not necessarily mean taxes go up. The whole object of this exercise is to put cuts on spending or reduce spending below the trend line that's going on now.
Yep. Okay, these are good questions for thought. I think the main thing all 6 of us are agreed on is that we've got to get to 34 states passing the application to Congress for the convention to happen. And we have 3 kinds of amendments we want to see. One is this one, fiscal restraint. Another one is term limits for federal officials. And the third kind of amendment we want to see passed is reining in the scope and power of the federal government, because we've really lost what it means to what federalism. We've lost what federalism means, and the national government has become bigger and more powerful than the 50 states, and that's not the way it was supposed to be. It's not the way the Constitution reads. So we need an amendment to fix that problem. So we hope and we work toward the day when the convention will convene. Dale Tipton.
Well, I just wanted to throw out one thought as people that are affiliated with convention of states and people that are paying attention to all of these issues. We have some pretty vibrant opinions, and we all, I think, collectively kind of see a storm cloud off over the horizon that we don't know exactly how long it's going to take to get to us, but we kind of foresee some bad things happening if there isn't some change in government. But my thought is, out of the general American population, how many people see that cloud? How many people are looking up to be aware of what actually is going on and what problems could be in store for their families, their businesses, etc. My concern is that we haven't reached the point that enough Americans are really aware of the problems that we face.
That's a pretty good answer to my previous question, too. What are some solutions? Make people aware of what's happening. Because I don't think most people are aware. We don't think in macro terms. We don't think in long range terms. We think in terms of what's the latest TikTok video and how many likes can I get on Facebook or Twitter. And I'm not talking about the 6 of us. I'm talking about the population out there. The vast majority of people are just interested in the next intellectual, emotional high that they can get. And we need to educate them on what the problems are. Well, panel, I want to thank you for your thoughts and your input. And we're going to wrap this one up, and we'll see everybody next month. Right now, we want to show you a video by our national COS president, Mark Meckler. It's called "The Day I'll Quit Fighting."
Empathize with people who would give up. It doesn't make sense to me. Sam Adams said, for those of you who prefer safety and security over liberty, over the animating fight for liberty, I hope that you enjoy licking the hands that feed you. May your chains rest lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. Like, do you understand that your kids and you are sentencing your kids and your grandkids and your friends' kids and your neighbors' kids to a lifetime of slavery and servitude, literally, of fear, of living in the darkness? But never, ever, never, never, never give up. George Washington lost the majority of his battles that he fought in the American Revolution. If you read his writings, if you read the letters where he was writing to Congress asking for money and troops, he was saying, we're losing. I don't have the troops I need. I don't have the supplies I need. Did he quit? What about the guys on the beach at Normandy? Like, what did they do? Did they just quit? Oh, there's, a lot of guys are dying around me. It's really bad. It looks really dismal. Those cliffs are huge. Machine gun fire raining down on us. And it's too hard. We should just quit. Thank God those people didn't quit. If they had, where would we be? I get discouraged for sure. And I will quit fighting at some point. And that point is when the first shovel of dirt hits the top of my box 6 feet down.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Dale, you and I are the only ones left. And you are still here because you're our state grassroots coordinator. And I want you to take a few minutes now to tell our audience about this brand new Step Up recruitment program. Take it away, Dale.
Yeah, that would be my pleasure. We have a new initiative that is kind of going on. You can see from what's on the page there, there's a link that goes out to people via text, and it's showing up in a variety of places on our social media platforms and, through some direct outreach type efforts. But really what we're trying to do is offer people the opportunity to get involved. As we talked about before, Convention of States is all about promoting self-governance, which really means we just need to be personally involved in our government at all different levels, what's going on around us. And we have many positions within Convention of States that allows us to be involved, to be of service, to raise awareness, and all of these things. So this is the landing page that you'll see, and within that landing page, that then there are some links to other areas if we want to bounce forward. And we've got this kind of, I guess, a couple of things of note. On each page is a telephone number. And so if you don't want to just interact with the internet and you want to interact with somebody real, all you have to do is place a call, and that will allow us to do that. But you have the opportunity. We have leader opportunities, which is showed here, leadership opportunities, and that may come in the form of being a district captain or a region captain or other things within the organization where you're going to be organizing and training other people, to do what we think is necessary to do. That requires a little bit more significant investment in personal time. If you don't have quite so much time, or if you don't want to be the person at the front of the room, we have a number of other volunteer opportunities where people can go out and assist at gun shows, information tables, all of those kind of things, or maybe they can write content for social media. Maybe they have a computer expertise. We have a lot of computer things going on. Maybe they can promote some interest there. There are just a number of different things that you can do at these different levels, organizing events or helping with our legislative team. All of that kind of falls under, the volunteer segment. And then within the community, if you think about it, oftentimes we're members of a community without participating in it. And so here we offer, there's a lot of things that are of value to us just to find out what is going on across our state. School boards, what's going on within your different school? Is critical race theory or these gender issues coming up that would potentially be harmful to our kids? Library boards even, what kind of material is there that our kids can access whenever they go to the library? And would we as parents approve of it? City councils, how is your tax money being spent? County councils the same way, and on up as it goes. We have more and more people that are getting involved in these different kind of positions. People that are trained that come up through the ranks of COS that are now migrating more fully into activity within their communities, holding positions of prominence. So whatever your likes are, whatever motivates you to be an activist, we feel like we have something for you. And so by clicking on these links, you can not only read about all of these different positions that are there, but you can also, reach out and, call once again if you have particular questions that you want to ask. If you do see something that you like and you'd like to get involved with us, the link takes you to a little application page that, you fill it out in just a few minutes, and then that will fire that off to state leadership, and there will be somebody that will be in touch with you shortly to answer your questions. But we encourage everybody to step forward and to get involved. The people that we have sitting around watching TV and moaning to their neighbors and their friends about how bad things are in the country or within their state, that's good that they're talking about it, but it's not helpful unless you take some steps forward. You have to literally get out of your house, get involved in meetings and things that are going on to really make a difference. And the founders, whenever they wrote the Constitution, that's what they envisioned. They envisioned that, you know, the government would be supported strongly by the people, and the people would know all of the things that were going on around them. And today, I think we've developed to a point where we have come to the point where we just automatically trust the people that we elect, and we assume that they're doing a good job, and they're doing a good job of being stewards over our money. And if you read the papers, you could probably realize that may not be true. And the only way that we're going to be able to put a handle on that is for individuals to get involved and then to express our opinions to those people we elect, because we know what they're doing. It's not just that we pull the lever for them and walk away without ever seeking any kind of accountability. We have to follow up, and we have to see that the people that we voted for are actually performing and doing the things that we hope that they would do. And so that's our mission, and that's the whole purpose of this recruitment effort, is to strengthen the organization and to strengthen the civic mindedness of the folks in Indiana.
Thanks, Dale. Those are great ways for people to get involved. And I hope lots of our listeners will go to the website and follow through on that, and maybe even give you a call even tonight, because you're still up. It's not too late to call Dale Tipton. Well, that brings us to the end of this month's roundtable. Before I say goodbye, I want to remind you of our email address. If you have any question at all about Convention of States, you can email your questions to us at raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in next Monday, March the 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern for our weekly COS Indiana Live, when our guest will be Stacy Garrett, a new district captain. And our next roundtable will be on the fourth Monday of March. That'll be March the 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm John Ackerman for COS Indiana Roundtable. Good night.